A reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 15 through 17. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. A third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep."
Do you have a smartphone? Would you like to follow today's message? Get the YouVersion Bible app. Search for a live event, enter your zip code. You can follow the notes, read deeper into the text, and watch all the video. If you would like to watch the message again or share the message with someone else, go to CROSSROADS website, click follow us on YouTube. There you can watch today's message or any of our previous videos. Remember, at Crossroads Church, we have an app for that.
Good morning. Again. Oh, I forgot one. If you're new to Crossroads, in the back as you leave, there's a desk, table, place where we have these red bags. And then you'll find things like this nifty little coffee cup and other things. But there's no food. I just want to tell you that right up front. But other than that, it's got some pretty nifty stuff in it. And that's our way of saying thanks for being here. Well, as I said before, my name is Mathews, and normally after the services, I would be back in the prayer room with my Bible study class, which, by the way, is studying the letter to the Philippians now, if you're interested. It's a good class. We kind of get raucous sometimes. Sometimes we laugh. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we read and just ponder. And you all are welcome to that if you want. There's room for everybody. We got a big table there if we need it. So, with that being said, the lesson today, the text today, is John 21, the last chapter in the Bible. And if you notice, somewhere in the side your bulletin, there is a paper which has the entire text of chapter 21 of John, just in case you're interested. Also, the words of Jesus are in red, so you don't have to look. It's just right there. So, with that, I guess I owe you an explanation because I'm going to get a little bit into the Greek and Hebrew languages a little bit as we go on, and you may wonder, well, why am I talking to you about that? Well, my background, some you know, some don't know. I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, and I spent a lot of time delivering babies, believe it or not. But I was also an intelligence analyst. And as part of the intelligence training, I had to take language courses. I took several courses in languages, and I've studied under a rabbi for Hebrew, and I've studied under Chuck Gustafson over on Berean Church. If you're aware of that, Reverend Chuck was a Greek scholar of some renown, and I got to study under him there. So that's my background. And as far as the Bible goes, when I was a little kid, about, yay tall, I went to a church where about all we ever did was read the Bible from beginning to end, from back to front, all the way over and over and over again. And so it's kind of drilled into me a lot of the stuff that's in the Bible. Okay, with all of that, let me go ahead and talk about John 21 today. There's the text in John 21 that we'll be looking at most closely is John 21, verses 15 through 18. And we'll look at the rest of the text while we're doing that, but that's what we'll be focused on. We heard this morning about some problems, and I'm not one of those who believe that the sky is falling. To me, it looks more like a slow motion train wreck that's happening. I mean, we've got Republicans and Democrats going at each other. It's the worst that it's been since the Depression, I believe. And of course, there were worse times like the Civil War where they really went after each other. But now they're doing that again. And Russia still is trying to annex the Ukraine. In China, the Chinese are actually building islands in the Pacific Ocean that will turn into military bases. And so they got several of those under construction, and 2 of them are actually already built and put into place. That's not something I've seen before. There's over 1 million Syrians that are leaving their civil war and going to Europe, and Europe is straining to hold them. I mean, you can see the European governments sort of struggling and straining and anger and vexation. And there is starvation. I mean, in a world that's awash with grain, we have starvation in like Venezuela and Yemen and countries like that. That's a problem. And the whole political world is crying out, help us, help us, help us. I was just reading the other day that the geneticists are forming new forms of life out of our DNA, which is a little bit frightening since we don't know exactly what those will do to the rest of us if they ever get loose. And that's a quandary. The climate change, which is making droughts in one place and then floods in another place, and we have long winters like the ones we just went through, and hot summers like what we went through last year. That's all happening. The Antarctic and the Arctic are continuously shrinking and melting. The seawater is coming up. In places like Bangladesh, Calcutta, in places in Asia, and some of the places here in the U.S., they're already right at water's edge. So when this thing keeps rising and rising, you can imagine it's going to throw us into turmoil. The whole scientific world is saying the same thing. Help us. Help us. Even in our own Christian faith. Like in China, the Chinese government is the one who appoints the bishops, not the church. In our country, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Methodists, our internal differences are just straining and tearing us apart. And even in philosophy, the postmodern philosophy that's out there says, we don't know anything and we can't know anything. And for the first time in centuries, the world of philosophy is saying, we're struggling. We got to find out what to do. We need answers. And so that's the world we find ourselves in today. Clearly, our problems are complicated. There's mental breakdowns and moral problems, as you probably know. Clearly, we need God's help. And fortunately, there is an answer to that. And I will be talking about that answer in our message today. But returning to 21st John, if you've ever been in the Holy Land, you've seen Lake Galilee. In the summer, it's kind of warm, but right about now, if you go out in the morning, you see the fog rolling in off Lake Galilee. There it is. It's hard to see at this time of year. There was a man standing on the shore of Galilee as the disciples were out in the boat fishing all night. And in verse 5, it says, he called to them, friends, don't you have any fish? No, they answered. Did any fishermen ever hear that before? And he said, throw your nets on the right side of the boat, and you will have lots of fish. When they did, they were unable to haul the fish in because of the large number. St. Jerome, quite a long time ago, is the one who translated the Greek version of the New Testament into Latin. And he says that there were 153 fish in that net. And just coincidentally, there at the time, it was considered that there were 153 nations in the world. So you can see what he's trying to inkling about, about the being saved. Well, verse 7 says, then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him because he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. There goes Peter, thinking again with his feet, right? It's just immediately reacting. But the events in this chapter occurred right after Jesus was resurrected. So these are post-resurrection appearances, as they're called. But Peter was quite a character. I mean, back in John 13, he said to Jesus, "I will never desert you." And then in John 18, 5 chapters later, Peter denied Christ 3 times. And what's Peter going to say to him after he's jumped into the water and is swimming to the shore? I mean, if it was me, I'd probably say something like, "Look, about last Thursday." But that's not what Jesus said. Instead, he asked Peter to bring him some of the fish that they caught. And so he brought him the fish, and he gave a breakfast of fish to Peter and the disciples. It was basically loaves of bread, or pieces of bread and fish. Bread and fish. Does that ring a bell? We began to think about the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Is going on, at least in my mind. We might pay attention to this also because whenever Jesus celebrates a meal, and he doesn't have a meal, he celebrates a meal. And the reason that he celebrates is it's like the celebration of communion. Bread, wine, another one of those. But every time he does that, he's going to do something significant. So we might want to pay close attention to that. And Jesus didn't respond to Peter, whatever Peter said to him, it isn't recorded, but Jesus didn't respond to that with anger. I mean, it would have been me. I probably would have been really mad. He had a right to be mad. I mean, that's his closest friend did that to him. It's not something that's easy to take. It reminds me of when I was 16 years old working on my grandfather's farm in Missouri. And I was out there. It was getting close to the end of the week, and I asked my grandfather if I could please take the car to town on Friday night. A thing any adolescent would probably do or think of doing. And my grandfather said, "No, I don't think so." Well, I stuck in my craw, and I waited till the night, till everyone was quiet and asleep. And then I got up, tiptoed out. I put the car in neutral, and I pushed it down the road until I got far enough away where I thought he wouldn't hear the sound of the engine starting. So I started up, and I went into town, and my cousins and I had a soda pop and hung out at the pool hall, the things that kids do, did that stuff. And when that was over, my cousins helped me push the car back to where it was. And I put the keys back on the hook, and I went to bed. And I got up in the morning to milk the cows. It's like 4-something in the morning. And I got up in the morning to milk them. And as I was milking them, I heard the barn door open, and my grandfather came in. And he just stood there for a little bit. And I was thinking, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So I was milking the cows, and he said, "You took the car to town last night after I told you not to, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "You probably are thinking right now that you're wondering if I will ever trust you again." And actually, that is what I was thinking. And then all he said was, "Well, you're going to have to live with that." And he turned around and walked out. Now, he could have responded in anger and slapped me or punished me somehow, but that's all he said, and it was over. And I just wrestled with that guilt and that shame, and I wish he would have punished me, and it would have been over, but it didn't. And so from that day until he died, I never told him anything that wasn't true. So you think for a minute about, well, would it have been more effective to punish me or yell at me, or would it have been more effective to do what he did? Obviously, I think it would have been more effective to do what he did, because I'm still, I know, Grandpa, I know. Well, let's look at verses 15 through 17, the focus of our text this morning. And 15 says, "When they had finished eating, Jesus said to them, 'Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me more than these?'" These. "Yes, Lord," he said, you know I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Verse 17, the third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "You know all things, Lord. You know that I love you." Okay, what's going on here? It's that these Do you love me more than these? What could that mean? Maybe it means disciples, huh? Maybe it means fishing and messing around in boats. Maybe it means something else. What could it mean? Well, it doesn't mean disciples, I can tell you that much. The grammar in the Greek and the vocabulary all point to one thing, that when he said, do you love me more than these, he meant these boats, messing around in boats. Anyone here ever messed around in a boat? Oh, come on now. This is Minnesota. Thank you. I see that hand. Is there another? So messing around in boats and fishing. So basically he was saying to leave the life of the fisherman behind. And why did he care so much about what Jesus, what Peter did? Well, in Mathews 16, we read that Jesus said that upon this rock, and the word in Greek is a rock for is Peter. It's the same as his name. That's why he was given that name, Petra, or Peter. Upon this rock I will build my church. Peter was going to end up leading the church in Rome. And it was not going to be easy. Well, why ask that question 3 times? Well, number one, he denied him 3 times. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. But in antiquity, when you repeat a phrase 3 times, that makes it a contract. In days before a lot of people could read and write, they had witnesses who would say, yeah, he said it 3 times, that's a contract. But in Hebrew and Arabic, instead of saying the word 3 times, all you have to do is repeat it once. Like, for instance, if you wanted to say that somebody spit, you'd say, well, he spit. But if you really wanted to say that he really spit a big one, kakapatui, one of those big suckers, you would say he spit a great spit. And so the repetition of those words would be, do you really, really love me? I mean, if we were going to say a murderer got the chair, right? You would be talking about getting electrocuted from the electric chair. But he's saying the intensive here. In fact, in the next verse, the intensive goes on about the verse 18. He says, very truly I tell you. Very truly. There's another intensive. It doesn't say actually very truly. It does the intensive again where he's repeating things. In truth, I tell you. That's another example of an intensive. When you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. Now, the most significant part of that particular verse is the phrase, stretch out the hands. Now, to us, that means something like, reaching or something? But it had a different meaning in Palestine 2,000 years ago. Stretch out your hands meant crucifixion. That's just like we would say the chair for the electric chair, stretch out your hands, with what you would say if you meant crucifixion. Said someone's going to crucify you. And so Jesus was telling Peter that loving him was not going to lead to fame and fortune. But he also wanted to give Peter an out, right? So, because Peter could have said, well, nope, I love you, but only so much. And then he would have an out. But Peter didn't take the out. This time, he was all in. I met a guy in Waseca, speaking of being all in. In Waseca Federal Penitentiary, I was doing mission there, playing music. And I was playing it for the Hispanics. The Hispanic community there, most of them are there because they're being held in order to later be deported. There are a few that are not, but most of them were. And they needed a church service in their own language so they could understand it. And so I was providing music there and trying to give a church service. And then one Sunday, a guy walked in. His name was John. John was a missionary to the Quechua people in Peru. Of course, they speak Spanish in Peru, but he also spoke Quechua, which was the Quechua they're descended from Incas. The Spanish first conquered them when they came, so they're still very much Indian, and they speak Quechua. So he was at that village at that time, And he said he was going around, he had tried to hand out pamphlets in the marketplace and introduce himself to people, and they were all very polite and everything, but nobody ever came to his service. And he was trying to figure out what to do. And then about that time, one of the Quechua villagers had a house, and the house was caught on fire. I don't know exactly what the cause of the fire was. He didn't say, but it caught on fire and it was burning. And the man and his wife got all the children out and collected as many of their belongings as they could and took them out, but they got burned. Well, John's wife was a nurse, so she bandaged up all their wounds, and they let them stay in their house until they could get on their feet again. And as they were looking at their house, they were going to try to rebuild it. So John and his wife stepped in and tried to help them rebuild the house. And while he was doing that, another man came from the village, another Quechuan came from the village, and he told John you're not wanted here. Get out or I'll kill you. Well, John didn't do anything about that. He just kept on working. And the man pulled out a machete and he started slicing at John. And he got him on the neck and he got him in the head. And John said his arms, well, I could still see the scars on his arms. He was trying to deflect the blade, so he wouldn't get hit. But he said he was a bloody mess by the time it was over. But then the Quechuan village chief came and told the man, look, this guy is not going to back down. Just let's leave. So he convinced him to leave. And John's wife sewed up the wounds, and John recovered. And then the man whose house was burnt, he took John around and introduced him to the village. At the village place where they hung out at the cantina, and in some of the other festivals that they had, he would stand up before them and introduce John. And then people started coming to John's church now. And so over time it grew and it grew and it grew. And even the man with the machete started coming to John's church at the time. And that was John's background. And so you might ask yourself, so how did he achieve that result? How did that happen? Well, first of all, let's face it, we don't convince other people to come. The Lord draws them. What we do is enable them to come by being welcoming and so on. So we're not. He wasn't being angry. He wasn't being bitter. He didn't even strike the guy back. All he did was try to defend himself by deflecting that machete away from himself. And that convinced people that he wasn't one of them. And the man with the machete had a story. And his story was that his son has been killed. There was a cocaine gang. This is Peru. There's a lot of cocaine in Peru. There was a cocaine gang that was there growing and taking the leaves over to be processed. And a rival gang wanted this territory, so they came and they fought with them. There was a big shootout, and the machete man's son had been killed by a stray bullet from that. So even though he had every reason to be really angry about outsiders coming in, which the villagers didn't trust, John didn't do that. He just simply went on about his business. And that then led to people feeling welcomed to come to his church. And that made his church grow. And so we did the same thing in the federal penitentiary. And John was the pastor of that small community. And it grew from 3 people, me, John, and one other guy, to 30 people when I left. So he was growing because people really needed that in the church. They're feeling isolated and alone anyway. Well, I think John is probably in company with Christian martyrs that we know about in the past. There was Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was a martyr according to the church tradition. There was almost all the apostles were martyred, and was Paul, who was allegedly killed about the same time as Peter was there in Rome. And Justin Martyr, who was born in Palestine but was murdered by the Romans for being a Christian at a time when it was very unpopular. And then there's remember Cassie Bernal. You may not remember the name. You remember the Columbine shootings, the Columbine High School? She was the one when the gunman said, "Do you believe in God?" She said, "Yes," and he shot her. She was that girl. She also was a martyr. So I think John was one of those. Oh, Joan of Arc. That's another martyr for you. So hopefully you and I won't have to undergo what they went through. But we are called by Jesus. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Because we were called. And Just one final story. There's a story about Jesus and an angel when in heaven, and the angel said to Jesus, okay, what is your strategy? What is your plan to take this message to the world? And Jesus said, I plan to send Christians into the world. And the angel said, oh, come on. We know humans. They're weak. They get distracted. They forget. It's inconvenient. What's your backup plan? And Jesus said, I have no backup plan. So that's a cute story, but the moral of the story is very serious. Jesus is counting on us. He's counting on us. So I ask you whether Jesus can count on you or not. Amen. Well, we go from here to a prayer time, and let me close this with a prayer. Then we'll step into that time. Lord, for your blessings for this past week, we give you our thanks and our praise. Please bring Pastor Paul and Pastor Deb back to us next week, this coming week. Please be with all of us here this week and with all of those in our Crossroads family. And please help us remember that you're counting on us, and give us the strength and discernment that we need to bring your answer to the world. And so now we go into the prayer time. The prayer partners come up front, please.